In books, we're different. In books, we're wizards and witches, hobbits and elves, lovers and detectives. In books, we dance between worlds with the flip of a page, and it's all just a few taps away. A few years ago, I visited 50 independent bookstores across the country. Not one of them sold books as cheaply as Amazon. And yet,
from 2009 through 2019, you see this shift happen, a gradual year-over-year growth to the point where over this 10-year period, over 50% growth in numbers in independent bookstores.
On my first trip, the one to 50 indie bookstores in 50 days, I was promoting my self-published novel. On this trip, I have a different plan. I don't have a box of books. I have film equipment, a cameraman, and a question. Why would anyone shop indie when there's a better price just a few clicks away? The most obvious differentiator between Amazon and indie bookstores is the physical, human, in-person experience.
I love thinking about that first moment you walk into a bookstore.
There's something about the small independent bookstores.
There's just a vibe and a feeling you get.
I think it's the book dust. I think there's something in the book dust that's calming.
She likes to smell it. You want people to have one of those moments where they do stop and take a breath and take a beat and just sort of, it's key for them to feel welcome and appreciated for exactly who they are in that body, in this moment, in this store.
They expect to walk in and be talking to someone who's well-versed in books and are able to make good recommendations. But beyond that, people just want a good browse. So we should just make ourselves available, but let them have the browsing experience where you can just get lost in the books.
Actually physically being in the shop. There's something about picking up a book, opening it.
I think it's just that personal touch. It seems a little bit more genuine, a little bit more authentic.
That moment of looking into somebody else's eyes and saying, here, this is worth your time, and I want to talk with you about it.
Interacting with the people in the place, and there's a little bit of magic that happens in the bookstore that you don't get online.
You know, I'm essentially doing sort of what the computer does. If I'm just matching something you've already read and enjoyed to something else that we have, that's the algorithm the computer uses.
Perhaps I'm being boastful, but I believe that I'm more valuable than an algorithm.
Booksellers have a better ability to not guide and not make a decision for you about what you should be, but maybe point you toward things that you haven't considered that you might like.
That's where the computer can't go. It can't make that leap to something completely out of left field that might be just the thing.
You feel like somebody actually cares about you than just advertisements coming at you.
What has surprised me is how much I really get close to my customers.
They become like your family in a way,
really do.
because
in a world where we're constantly connected to other people, but maybe feeling less meaningfully in touch with them.
We can make good environments in bookstores.
It's shared and it becomes a community place.
We have made it to Birmingham, Alabama, which means we've finished the first section of our trip. We've gotten used to staying on couches for the past few days. We have a routine now. Wake up really early, drive a couple hours to bookstore number 1, shoot for about 3 hours, get on the road, drive for another 2 or 3, shoot at bookstore number 2 for another few hours, and then upload all of our footage, back things up, and repeat. All in all, a great first leg of the trip. Had some great conversations with booksellers about the importance of in-person, in-store interactions. I can't help but think that maybe younger people don't value that face-to-face connection as much as older generations.
The segments of books that are continue to outperform, I think, many expectations from outsiders. Young adult, children's books, some of the fastest growing segments in the industry.
But there's still that question of why indie bookstores? Can we not introduce our young people to reading online, say? Or can we not foster that love in them in some other way? What about indie bookstores makes them uniquely suited to growing this love in kids? That's the main question I have for booksellers going into our next leg of the trip.
Reading is everything. Literacy is so important. You need it forever.
Learning to read is a lot about imagination.
Really instilling imagination into kids.
We know that once they learn how to read early on, they'll be okay. Because what really matters, right, is that they get it. They get the magic, they want more.
When you can have the books in an interesting and exciting environment, it just makes it even more excited to read them.
For kids, walking into a bookstore like this, it just inspires them to be creative.
The toddlers love to come around the corner, go to their place for their books.
You see kids coming in from the entrance and just run in and get excited to be here.
When we opened the store, and a mother and a grandmother and a little girl came in, and the little girl stopped in her tracks and she looked around. And I said, tell me what words best describe where you are right now. And she said, a home and a library. And I thought, okay, I think we did it.
In the 19th century, when there was no television and there were no electronic devices, families would sit around and read stories to one another at night. And this reinforced the family experience.
Kids gravitate towards things that become beloved early on. So probably one of the most precious things that kids can get is story time.
We do story time here twice a week.
We have dedicated Saturday morning story time.
Every Saturday morning for the kids,
They're all sitting and engaging in something together. And they're all patiently listening together.
If I'm sitting there with my nephew and I'm telling him the story of the bear, where the boy is chasing the bear in the forest and the bear turns around and my nephew goes, ah, we have shared an emotional experience.
That's what kids remember. That'll be something that'll stick in their head.
And that is the fundamental common ground of mankind, is in the stories that we tell.
We are in Florida, I think. Thus far on the trip, booksellers have presented a compelling case for shopping at indie bookstores. The first reason has to do with the in-person, in-store interactions. The second with the ecosystem that indies have created that fosters a love of reading in our young people. Both of those reasons have to do with togetherness, with convening. So, I think the obvious next place to turn to in interviews is the book lover's favorite place to convene, which is the book club.
I think we have 17 regular monthly book clubs.
We have a science fiction and horror book club,
The graphic novel book club,
Understanding the Middle East book club,
romance book club,
children's book clubs.
true crime book club.
we've started saying, hey, come to our book club. You need to meet people. This is a great way to meet people in the community and to connect.
We sometimes think about reading as a solitary act, but I don't think it is.
The book is a perfect social tool.
There's like no quicker way to make a friend than realizing they have the same favorite book as you.
In the case of a book club, it can be the focus of a group of people getting together and talking about something, or it can just be your excuse to get together.
We need books in order to connect in that way because it isn't easy to do it on our own.
Books do a lot of things to bridge a gap that leads to communicating, but I think one of them is inciting empathy.
You are really getting to know one another without necessarily having to ask personal questions.
It just gives you a space to talk about hard topics without you being the villain or without you being the victim.
Things reveal themselves in conversation and sharing that might not have if you just read the book by yourself.
Which makes bookstores a perfect place for conversations and discussions that can't go on at a commissioner's meeting.
This is probably One of the real values of having a book club that meets at a bookstore, different people
from disparate backgrounds
can come together
and just talk.
We are in Richmond, Virginia. There is a hurricane behind us. It has been tailing us for the past 100 miles. Hopefully none of our bookstores down the road will be hit, but we'll see. In the past few bookseller interviews, my stereotypical idea of a book group has been corrected. But there are also very important conversations that happen, conversations that continue in other kinds of events.
We have been having quite a few really great authors come in.
We had a fantastic author recently.
We're bringing in authors far and wide.
These other events seem more commercial. At least that's my theory, just bookstores trying to sell books. But we'll see what the booksellers have to say.
When we do an event, we're certainly interested ultimately in getting as many people as possible to buy the book, but there's more to an event. The reason we do an event.
I do want to make money, but bottom line, I don't care if they buy the book or not. I care that they're in my store.
Even if they sold 3 books or whatever, it's just the dialogue and the meeting of the people is way more important.
We might lose money on staffing, and they might lose money on providing donuts, but it's about spreading the message, spreading that weird spark of creativity that they might have. I see a bookstore as like a gathering point for a culture of ideas.
It's a place for open minds, creativity, and inspiration.
Something that helps inform, entertain, enlighten.
To see a subculture all come together at one event is, even if you're not part of their thing, it's a joy to host it.
There's a certain kind of energy and excitement on the book floor. We move all these book tables and shelves out of the way and set up dozens and dozens of chairs.
The bookstore was full in both directions.
With people from the neighborhood.
People outside were laying down with their faces pressed to the sidewalk to try to listen to what was happening. And it looked like, maybe 30 people praying together.
There's something really special about being here with actual books and other like-minded book lovers that is so alternative to maybe our everyday life.
It's intoxicating to feel like you're a part of this, swelling ocean of love.
We're hosting a party, and you're letting us.
It's an amazing feeling of community right there.
Burns my whole mouth. We are in Boston for yet another early morning, and we are tired. The hurricane has been chasing us up the East Coast and knocking out power to some of our bookstores, which means we've had to reschedule on the road. Luckily, somehow, all that has worked out. And even the store we went to that did not have power, that turned out pretty fine too. Anyway, we are about to start the final leg of our trip. So I've been thinking about the interviews we've done so far, and we've talked about human interaction, conversation, people gathering, people coming together. And I think we've been dancing around this idea of bookstores being a community hub.
Well, I'm a huge believer that a bookstore should never just function as a bookstore.
It becomes a place in which people can talk about ideas.
Why would you just sell books when you have a space where you could engage people into reading in different ways?
It just seems like they go beyond retail, but I'm not quite sure what that means yet. So in this final leg of the trip, in these interviews, that's what I want to ask about. I want to understand what it means to be a community hub. I also want to sleep.
Our overall goal is to serve the community as best as we can.
We do a lot with local initiatives in schools and charitable things because we believe in putting our money back in our city.
We've done so much fundraising over the last 4 months. So every November on a Sunday, we have a day designated for the I Love My Library event. And all the sales on that day, 20% of the sales go to the library.
I mean, we do a lot of events with the library. The more readers there are across the board, the better off everybody is.
We wanted to find ways to improve literacy in the community.
We give away 500, 600, 700 books to local kids who wouldn't be getting a book for the holidays.
We've sent out over about 5,000 books in the last 3 months to low-income students around the city.
We just came up with, let's do a community cookbook. So we printed it at a local Indiana printer, and we've been selling them to raise money for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library of Johnson County, which is sending those books to kids birth to kindergarten to make sure they're kindergarten ready.
It's the bookstore's responsibility to work toward a better world.
Spread various kinds of messages about justice.
Because it's everyone's responsibility to do that.
We would do school book fairs where we would bring books by African-American writers. A lot of our work was just sort of introducing people to stuff that they didn't know existed or that they were unsure of.
It's way beyond the transactional element of exchanging money for a product.
It's not something that people get rich doing, but it's something that communities get richer because people are doing it.
Well done indeed. We spent the whole trip trying to answer a simple question. Why should people care about shopping indie? We heard some great answers. We should shop at indie bookstores because of in-person interaction, because of the children's programming, because of book clubs and author events, and the way indies engage with their community. But the value of all those things largely comes from being together, which during the pandemic has been difficult.
Coronavirus creates a unique set of challenges for bookstore owners. The reality is that the sector is hurting.
Our sales, down by at least 70%.
It really felt for several months like we were reinventing ourselves every week.
All these independent stores, they're having extra costs of the pandemic.
It's not easy to make it as an independent bookstore.
All of these components are putting a ton of pressure on bookstore owners, and the challenge for them is multifaceted right now.
If you don't support places that you love, they will go away.
Nobody wants to see a shopping district that's all chains. Supporting small businesses not only supports your local economy, but it also supports the emotional health of your community.
The booksellers gave me a ton of great reasons to shop indie. But I think the best reason of all was something they never actually said. At least not with their words. It came through in their smiles, in the light of their eyes, the passion of their voices. And it's all the reason that I need. Indie booksellers love selling books. They're interested in what I'm reading. They care. There's a connection in that exchange. And now that I know from the pandemic how it feels to be isolated and cut off, that connection is more important to me. So the convenience of shopping online is no longer as tempting because I know indie bookstores offer something more, something I need. But acknowledging the value of indies isn't enough. If we want to keep our bookshops on Main Street, we need to support them. The question is, how do we do that? The best way to support your local indie bookstore is to shop there. We are taking that one step further. Every book we bought on the road, we're shipping to someone we think will like it. And we're sending a little message.
Oh. Hashtag give an indie book.
So the next time you're about to buy a book, think indie, because those booksellers will love selling to you. No matter what you look like, who you like, or what you read. Because in books, we're all different anyway. And in bookstores, we're all different together.
That's really what it comes down to. The main question is, who cares? Why do bookstores matter? And why should people really give it a second thought?
The idea of this bookstore being born was the idea that we needed a community space to gather and to read and to engage in something we all love that isn't encouraged socially in a huge way.
So there's a lot of other experiences that you could have as a consumer where you feel like I am not enough. And bookstores, I always leave a bookstore feeling full and excited and curious and wanting to learn more and grow more, and not I should really be thinner, prettier, faster, stronger. It's just you can be a human in a bookstore.
And if you don't have independent stores where people cater to those interests, then people will start becoming more and more and more the same. And honest to God, I can't imagine anything worse than a world in which everybody is the same.
If you like a homogeneous world, then having chain stores and chain restaurants and corporate stores you're built for that, and it's built for you. But if you have any interest in diversity of opinion and diversity of look and diversity of style and diversity of pretty much anything, then independent bookstores are one, brick in that wall.
How can you not be excited about books? How can you not be excited to walk into an independent bookstore and see all these things you've never heard of before, never seen before, things you would never find by looking on the internet?
Most of us truly deeply care about your experience and your feelings and your families and your life. And we understand that an algorithm will never provide that for you.
One thing that we know is that human beings, we are hungry for these social interactions. It's just who we are. And what often happens is that you have to create a common experience or a common activity for people to come together. And what bookstores do and books do for people is they flatten the playing field.
And having these warm environments where I can say, so this is what I was told. This is what this book says. How do I reconcile these two ideas? Having those environments is so important for community.
When people get together regularly around a book and they're with people who are different from them in other ways, but they have this in common, then they are going to see those people as us instead of them. And they are going to be a much more tolerant and welcoming community as a result of that.
That one-on-one individualized attention from one of our booksellers who are genuinely passionate about the things that they read and the genres that they love is something you will never be able to get online. Here, that's what we do, and we do it because we love it.
Owning a bookstore and opening it up for my community is a big hug for where we are, a celebration of place and a celebration of people. And the great thing about books is that we can always read a book and travel in story. And I love making that my life's work.
That was so beautiful. Thank you so much. And I am sorry about the tech difficulties at the beginning, but we'll move on. Before we get going with the conversation, I just want to welcome you all. My name is Leslie Hendrickson. I'm on the steering committee of the Newburyport Literary Festival. This is our 17th edition. And now I will introduce our panelists. So in 2019, Mason Engel took a road trip around the country to visit 50 independent bookstores in 50 days. His goal was to self-promote his self-published novel, 2084, but his conversations with booksellers shifted his focus. He decided to take a second trip. He would no longer be walking into bookstores with his book, but with his camera and the questions, why shop indie? The documentary, which we just watched, The Bookstour, will be on public television this spring, and he continues to work on his own books and bookish films from his home in Los Angeles. Hannah Harlow, who is on the steering committee of the Newburyport Literary Festival, has an MFA in fiction from the Bennington Writing Seminars. After working in publishing for 17 years, most recently at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt as Executive Director of Marketing, she left in January 2020 to purchase the bookshop at Beverly Farms in Beverly, Massachusetts. She lives on the North Shore with her husband and 2 boys. And after managing one of the country's leading independent bookstore cafes and working in publishing, Donna Paz Kaufman founded the Bookstour training group of Paz and Associates in 1992, with the mission of helping booksellers build skills and insights so that they may lead healthy, life-driven, profitable, independent bookstores. Today, Donna and her husband, Mark, also own Story and Song Bookstore Bistro, a 4,500 bookstore cafe on Amelia Island, Florida. And this year launched the private operating foundation Story and Songs Center for Arts and Culture. She holds a business degree and is a certified trainer in customer service and leadership. Thank you all so much for being here. And Mason, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you to Newburyport. We have a great turnout here, almost 100 people watching the film and tuning in to watch our wonderful panelists, so thank you all. Quick icebreaker question for both of you two. It's a two-part question. The first one is, how long have you been selling books? And the second is, what is your favorite bookstore that's not your own? Donna, do you want to start?
Oh gosh, those are hard, Mason. They're wonderful. My favorite bookstore is actually Jeff Kinney's store, and it's hard to pick, a favorite. But we were involved with Jeff to launch that store, and he wanted magic, and boy, he created it. And in Plainville, Massachusetts, such a great store. And the first question is, when do we start selling books? I think when I got my first job in publishing, when I was 21, I understood. But I think as a child, we probably all sold books to others because we just got so excited about a story.
Yeah,
Great.
I think I would say
Hannah?
the same. I've been selling books my whole life. Right out of college, I got a job at a publisher. So I was selling books for them for 17 years. But I bought the bookshop in 2020, as Leslie said. So I've been an indie bookseller for just over 2 years. A favorite store is so hard to pick. Jeff Kinney's store is really magical. I guess I'll go with the store I went to growing up, which was the Andover Bookstore in Andover, Massachusetts, which had a fireplace, and it was the cozy bookstore of my dreams. So
A fireplace in a bookstore sounds a little dangerous, but also very cozy and
cozy.
and amazing. Question. This is actually another question for you, Hannah. So in the film, it's in many ways an essay on why independent bookstores are valuable to their communities, and we posited 5.5, 6 reasons that we saw that indies are valuable. So the in-person interaction that you get, children's programming, book clubs, author events, the charitable work that they do and that they serve as community hubs. And for me personally, I like working with people and buying from people who love what they do. And that was our bonus number 6. Of all those reasons, is there one that jumps out to you as being particularly important, or is there something missing, some other reason why indies are so valuable to their communities?
That's tough, because I do think all of them are important. And I think in our first 2 years of owning this store, we've been doing a lot of experimentation and trying to figure out what kind of community do we have? What are the things that our store can do the best to serve that community? So, we're a pretty small store, 1,000 square feet, and we don't have a big space for holding events. So one of the things I've been realizing is maybe we're not the store that's going to hold a ton of events every year. So, what are the other community aspects that we can, utilize to serve our constituents? So, while everything's important, I think there are certain of the elements that you covered that are more important to different bookstores for different reasons. So for us, it's not necessarily the events, but, it is having those like one-on-one conversations. It's working with community book clubs and helping them find the right fits for their book clubs. It's working with the schools to do book fairs. So less the events for us, but everything else.
Well, and that makes sense because every community is different. And so the bookstores that serve them should be different in the same way. Donna, I have a question for you. This is a quote from Janet, who was going to be our third panelist, but who unfortunately couldn't join us today. She said in maybe the opening 5 minutes of the film, when referring to a customer's experience when they come into an independent bookstore, it's key for them to feel welcome and appreciated for exactly who they are in that body, in this moment, in this store. And I think that speaks to very beautifully the experience that a lot of bookstores hope that their customers have. So I'm wondering, how do you go about creating that experience at Story and Song and with the bookstores that you consult with?
Mhm. Well, as I look at and talk with colleagues in the book business, I think there are lots of things that we have in common, and that's a big one. That we are all drawn to this work because we love the diversity of reading material. We are advocates for First Amendment rights. Banning books is a challenge that we face over and over again, and we're pretty unified in our thoughts about those things. So in your previous question about you did such a good job of delineating all of the ways that we collectively improve and enhance life in our communities and for society in general. And I think the one thing about delivering that experience is having a set of core beliefs and creating a work environment. And this is a big one, especially as we look at our online competitor continuing to push back against its own employees, is to treat everybody with kindness. And we have conversations at Story and Song about courtesy and kindness and respect. And before we even hire anyone, our first page of our employment application has our core beliefs. And it clearly states lots of things about customer service, but also that we co-create our workplace. And I think that's a big one. You know, if you're having a bad day, don't spread that bad energy to a crew member. Deal with it or push it aside until you have space to deal with it. But all of that translates right to the customer experience. If we're having difficulties within ourselves or with one another, it's going to work against the bigger picture. So I think that the key is hiring and being clear. And sometimes people don't know why they've hated their other jobs or why they've left corporate America and what they're looking for. And I think we booksellers create a different kind of work environment, and it resonates from what we consider our true north, and the true north is people.
I felt that in every store that I walked into, and that's for people who are looking for something. And that's many people who walk into an independent bookstore. It's all the more comforting, not just to find that something in a book, but to sense it in the people that you're talking to feel that passion is contagious, and I think generally healthy. Hannah, I have another quote question for you. This one is from Donna and is one of my favorite bites in the whole film. But Donna, you were talking about a grandmother and a little girl who walked into the store, and the girl was looking around kind of in awe. And when you prompted her what she was feeling, what she was thinking, she said that it felt like a home and a library. So Hannah, I'm wondering, for your shop, would you say that that's an accurate sort of synthesis, a combination of those two places, and along the lines of what Donna is talking about, being just kind and good people? How do you create an environment that feels like a home and also like a library?
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that's what people feel when they walk in here. And we have 2 rooms, and one room is dedicated to children's books, and so we have some bean bags in there. And we have a mom and a daughter who this woman has 2 kids, and their pickup times at school are staggered. So she has like a half hour with her daughter to kind of kill, and they come here and they just sit and read, and they often apologize, because they don't buy everything every time they're in here. And every time I'm like, I love that you come here, and I love that you bring your daughter here, and she just loves reading, and I don't need you to buy something every time. Like, this is, I want them to feel like this is their space too. And I hope everyone who walks in feels that way. And I loved what Donna was saying. And we always try to make everyone feel comfortable, of course. But, a lot of people walk in and they're like, oh, I'm looking for like, I'm embarrassed to say like this type of book, like a rom-com or whatever it is, and I'm like, there is zero judgment here. Like, I honestly don't care what you read. I'm just psyched you're reading, and I'm psyched that you're walking into my store. And like, I read all types of books. There's no like right book, and a book refers to so many different types of things. And that's one thing I've realized even more owning a store. When I worked in publishing, I just worked on adult books, like fiction and nonfiction. I have kids, we read a ton of books. So obviously kids books and general adult books are like a given, but we have, it's like, what about cookbooks? What about birding guides? What about gardening guides? So there's just so much, and we try to have a little bit of something for everybody.
Well, you've just teed up my segue for me, Hannah. And this is a little bit tougher of a question. Unfortunately, my film also tees it up. But for the folks watching, you may have noticed that all of our interview subjects looked somewhat the same. We had a split of men and women, but everyone we interviewed was white or identified as white. As it is with many other industries, diversity in the book world and publishing and in bookstores is something that needs to be improved. And I won't ask you both to give a treatise on what's gone wrong and how to fix the whole industry, but I'm wondering if you do anything at your individual shops that that could maybe start to change the complexion of who we see in bookstores.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, yes, there's so much more we should be doing, and it's a troubled history. Just for starters, we try to make sure that our shelves reflect a diversity of authors and topics and subjects. We don't have a ton of staff in the store. I have 3 very part-time booksellers. But as we hire, it's on me to make a greater effort to advertise in a greater variety of places and to do my due diligence to make sure that, people from all different places have an opportunity to apply for this job. I mean, yeah,
it's not an easy thing.
It's not an easy thing, but we all have to try harder.
Mm-hmm. At Story and Song, one of the first people I hired was an African-American woman, Dirsha. You see her several times in the film, and she is a gem. I stole her from early childhood development. She was teaching preschool. And I have learned so much from Dirsha, and she was just fabulous in pointing out the ways that African Americans and people of color would feel more comfortable in our store. So we added a line of greeting cards. And I didn't really realize that, but I started to look at the greeting cards that I was buying to see if there are people, and if there are people, what color are they, or what do they look like? So hiring somebody and making them part of your team. And now Dirsha is one of our very first salaried employees who got a profit sharing check last year. So I'm so proud of her. We hired a Hispanic woman in our bistro. She's been key in growing that business, and gay and lesbian employees, crew members who help sensitize us and help us learn about the world. So I think the product selection is something that we need to also spend some time with. And Hannah, I'm so glad, in the publishing world, and you probably were part of helping that happen, because you left not too long ago, but the books are more diverse. So I think if I can buy some greeting cards that appeal to people of color, and we have books that have jacket images of people in color, that we don't look like just an industry that sells white people selling books to white people. So the graphics, the images, and the product selection, I think, are key, and we can keep reaching out. And I will say it is working at Story and Song. We have a more diverse customer base than many other businesses on this island.
Well, I'm glad, and I thank you both for the work you're doing, not just in selling books, but keeping that element of the industry in mind as well. Donna, this is a question for you. I wonder if you could just very briefly explain the consulting business that you and Mark have, and I have a quick follow-up after that.
Okay, the bottom line was when I left Davis Kidd Booksellers, it was a 20,000 square foot bookstore with a 35 seat cafe. And I just wanted to help booksellers because at conferences I could hear that people who were teachers and librarians and non-business people didn't know really about bookkeeping or accounting or how to read and manage their businesses. So that's always been my first love is I'm an idea person. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to hang out my shingle. And if some people need some help, I'll help them. And if you can add and subtract, you can get this. So that was my basic premise 30 years ago. And for 30 years, I thought to myself, I'm helping people may have their dreams come true. We've helped open so many bookstores. And I thought, oh, Mark, I hope one day it can work for us because for so many tries, it didn't work. So right now I'm kind of living the dream and it is very hard work. But I think people who want to open bookstores and any of you who are joining us today who have family members or friends or know of anybody, it's easy to lose your shirt and all of that hard money, hard wealth that your family has worked for. So it's if you're changing professions, it makes sense to understand and get some training.
I will say that I called Donna when I was buying my bookstore and I have their book on my shelf. I reference it often in my early days, especially, and they're terrific. And there aren't a lot of other resources out there. The American Bookseller Association has a lot of resources too, but Donna's like, I could email her an emergency too, and she was right there answering. So thank you.
Well, that's so cool. We have a consulting connection on the call as well.
Well, and Hannah, I'm so proud of you for taking the leap into the independent bookstore world after spending so much time in publishing. I think that's true of a lot of us, that we get into the book business from a variety of angles, and then we don't leave. You don't see book people jumping into a totally different industry. No, none of us are going to sell insurance.
No, and I was, to Donna's point, I knew the publishing side, and thank God, because it's like such a weird, business. But I got to the bookstore and the accounting is insane and so time consuming. So there's all these little things that, if you don't have a background in any of the book areas, like it can be really confusing. And there are a lot of things you don't know about that can help your bottom line.
Well, so my follow-up then might actually be for both of you. Before you took the leap into the bookstore owning business, you probably had a conception of what it would be like to own a bookstore. And then when you started owning and running a bookstore, I'm sure that conception changed. Donna, for you, I'm wondering what the most common misconception is that people come in with. And Hannah, maybe if you had one of your own when you first started working, I'm curious about both of those.
I think the thing that people oftentimes get wrong is that there's so much that happens behind the scenes. You see a beautiful environment that you want to hang out in front of the house. In back of the house, it's pretty crazy. And it's filled with multitasking all day long, right, Hannah? We're all in the same boat. We're opening invoices, we're paying bills, we're putting out fires. I mean, the list is endless. And then you've got a long list of things to do, and you might get a phone call that day that somebody's got COVID in the family and they've been exposed and they can't come in. So it's a long, hard day some days.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I don't have like a ton of staff. I'm mostly running this store on my own. So I'm in the store by myself a lot of days for hours on end. And I'm like, okay, I've got bills to pay, I've got books to receive, and I've got customers to wait on. So there's no like, I have an hour set aside to do this. It's like, no, I got to squeeze this in between, running the store. Like just helping customers. And like Donna said, I think that sometimes I will get to the end of the day and I'm like, wait, I've been standing behind the counter. I've been in the back room for the past 8 hours. Like, I haven't been out to the front, and I haven't like neatened the shelves and restocked and actually taken a look at what the customers are seeing. So that's what I'm constantly reminding myself. Okay, walk in the door and look at the store from the customer's perspective and like make sure this is the store you want to present to them.
So not a lot of reading behind the counter, it sounds like.
No, but do you know, I had a bookseller come in yesterday afternoon and I was sitting in the back. I was like, I was reading and I was a little embarrassed, even though I think that's what everyone thinks is happening. But I was like, I have 2 pages left. I have to finish this book. It was so good.
Well, we can give you 2 pages, I think. Yeah. We were coming up on an hour here momentarily. I have one more question for you two, and then if anyone watching has questions for Donna or Hannah, please put them in the Q&A. For both of you, there was an element of the film that we had to shave out due to time constraints with the television requirements, and that was about BINC. And BINC is an abbreviation for the Book Industry Charitable Foundation. Donna, I've asked you this before, but I'll ask again, and Hannah, for the first time, have either of you or have either of your booksellers been helped by BINC? For some context for everyone, BINC supports booksellers who are going through times of financial crisis and can oftentimes provide a little bump when needed. So Donna and Hannah, have you personally or have your booksellers been helped by BINC?
So I personally, no, but I'm glad you asked this to give me the opportunity to say that I work with BINC, and I've worked with them with a couple of my friends to create a scholarship for booksellers in my former boss's name. Her name was Carla Gray, and she was my boss and colleague and friend for many years, and she passed away suddenly, but she started her career as an independent bookseller. So we started a scholarship in her name that supports kind of new to bookselling booksellers. So people who have been a bookseller less than 5 years, because what we heard from a lot of independent bookstore owners and from other booksellers was that it was hard to stay a bookseller because the pay is terrible, and for a variety of other reasons. And so we wanted to at least do something small, our small part, to help booksellers stay in the business. So this is a scholarship that sends one bookseller each year to some educational programming, to the Winter Institute and to their regional trade show in the fall, and also provides a stipend for them to work on like a community project. So it's really cool, and BINC has been amazing in helping us get that off the ground, and finding the booksellers and doing all the administration for us. So I love them. They do amazing work.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we've been the consulting business has been a donor to BINC for a long time because there hasn't been a safety net, and sometimes people just get stuck. So we're a community. We care about one another, and so we've been a donor for that, and we've done some pro bono work with BINC to help them with certain programs. And as a bookseller, as a business owner, and I think we've all probably had some experience that somebody gets sick on staff. And certainly during COVID, we had a few people who needed to be out. But I think as long as I can cover that, I want to, because I know that there are a lot of other people who have huge needs. So if somebody's out for a week, I'm going to try my darndest as a bookseller and an employer to see them through. It helps to have a kitchen in our store too, because we can pack up a bunch of food and send it to the family. So, but BINC is amazing. I hope all industries have a model like this of caring for one another.
Well, thank you both. I put a link to BINC's website in the chat if anyone feels so compelled to support them. We're now getting into some audience questions. We're also running up on time for people watching at home. If you have to jump off, of course, feel free. But Hannah and Donna, if you have a few more minutes, we can knock out some of these questions. From Carolyn was asking about the list of stores that appeared in the film and if there are still images of those stores anywhere. Yes, I'll put my email in the chat, so please reach out to me individually. I don't have that up on the website yet. But for some other questions, Christina was wondering about libraries and how independent bookstores work with libraries. She loves both bookshops and her local library. Are those two entities competitors? How do you work with your local library?
Mhm. Well, I'm a Friends of the Library former president, and I know how hard it is for them to keep programs going. Budgets are always an issue. So we work with our library, and we've got the luxury of some space. We have a building that actually is too big. It's bigger than what we need. But we have a really decent rent. So we have programs, and we work with them, and we offer them space. Where our customers can get a glass of wine, a cup of coffee from our bistro, and it's just a more relaxed setting. So we do that, and then we put in our newsletters some promotions when they have things going on, like library card sign up day and that kind of stuff. So we love working with our library. We're very good. They're book people too, and they're our friends.
Yeah, I think someone in the film said, the more readers there are, the better for everyone. So we also love our libraries. We have one right up the street, and actually they purchase kind of discounted gift cards from us to give to their as prizes for their reading programs for kids. So we get a lot of kids walking in with the gift cards that they got from the library, and we buy books with them, and it's really sweet. But I know a lot of people I see in the Twitter book talk that a lot of people wonder if borrowing books from libraries is not good for authors or bookstores. And, I don't expect every single person to buy every single book from an indie bookstore. That, the amount I read, that would break the bank. But, so borrow some from libraries. Libraries are amazing. And then buy some from your indie bookstore. You got to spread the wealth, so I think it helps everybody.
Yeah, Mason, do you mind if I jump in again? Because this is a book festival. I think we're all kindred spirits. It's the library, it's the bookstore, it's the literacy organization, whomever is doing tutoring, if that's going on. We are all working towards an enhanced quality of life, and especially a better start for a lot of kids in life through reading.
Well, there's no competition in that, just teamwork. Maybe related to this question, we had another question from Catherine about the location of bookstores. Would you say that independent bookstores are more often than not in affluent areas? And how does that positioning complement the positioning of libraries?
That's an interesting question. Ours happens to be in a pretty affluent neighborhood, but my store's been here since 1968, so I don't take any credit for it being here or not being here. But maybe that has traditionally been true. I'm not sure, but I will say we have I'm in Massachusetts on the coast. We have a ton of bookstores around. There's one. We have another one in town. And we're friends. So I'll just say that, again, to the competition thing, we don't feel like we're competing. We feel like we're working together. So, and I think most indies feel that way.
Mason, it's a tricky thing because you have to survive. You have to be in a market where you can sell enough things to pay your rent, to pay your people, and so forth. So sustainability very much relies on reaching certain numbers. And so you find out, how can we serve and how can we better serve to fill more of the need so that we can keep our business going and keep our good work going. So I see two trends. It will always be the case that bookstores will do better in places where people are highly educated and have extra money. to buy books. So that oftentimes means the more affluent neighborhoods. Now, simultaneously, what's happening is the rents are increasing so at such a clip that many booksellers have just taken on alternative locations, what we call B locations. It's not on Main Street. It might be in another part of town or around the corner or in a house. And we work like crazy to be a destination that people will actually get in the car or find a way to get to us. So I hope that all of you who are listening and are part of this session today will, wherever you travel, seek out the independent bookstores, because I think more and more we're going to see them off Main Street. And that's a sustainability issue, which just makes it a little harder for us to do our marketing and a little harder for you to stray from the hubs and find us.
Well said. I'm hoping that institutions like libraries, who get their funding not from consumers, but from other entities who are not so bound by commerce, can fill maybe some of the gaps that are left by the commercial realities of independent bookstores. We have one last question. Scott is wondering, for each of you, what is a feature of your shop that reflects something local about your community, something unique to where your shop is located?
I love that question. Well, like I said, we're located on the coast. We have a beach right down the street. So our local section, which has some local history and local authors, but right below that is our nautical section. So we do have a lot of people that come in looking for nautical history, local nautical history. We have a lot of boaters. So we have like tide charts and I don't know, this book called Eldridge's that I didn't know about until I got here, but it's a book of tide charts for the whole year that a lot of boat people come in looking for. So that, I guess that would be ours.
I think there are two things at Story and Song. We're down the coast, but take 95 and keep going until you pass the Florida border and you'll find Amelia Island there. And we too love the water and the beach and the birds and all of the fun things about being at the coast. And we've got some really we're a real artsy town, and there are a lot of creative people, and I take on a lot of one-of-a-kind handmade items. And so we'll take on paintings and little tiny shells that have been painted, and just really affordable but handmade items. And this past year, I'm so proud of the crew, we published our own book, and it's called Amelia Island's Happy Places, The Insider's Guide. So it was kind of fun to do our own book, and it's already a bestseller for us, and it's simply a celebration of our sense of place.
Donna, we also published our own book last year. We did a coloring book of kind of hot spots around the North Shore of Massachusetts.
Can I steal that idea?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna do it. I'll send you a copy.
I'll send you one of ours.
Okay.
Well, we're already brainstorming. It's a win for no other reason than that. Those are the only questions that we have from the audience, and we're already a few minutes over. So I just want to thank Leslie again for setting this up, and thank Newburyport for having us. Thank you, Donna and Hannah, for being our wonderful panelists. And thank you for watching, everyone.
Thank you, Mason. This was amazing. Again, I'm sorry that we got off to a rocky start, but we did okay in the end, and you all were brilliant, of course. And with that, again, thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.